I used to believe graduation day was supposed to feel like a finish line, a moment where everything you endured finally made sense. I was wrong. For me, it was the day I learned exactly how little my family valued me, and exactly how powerful silence could be. My name is Emily Carter. I am 26 years old. I grew up in a quiet suburb outside Portland, Oregon, in a house that looked warm from the outside but always felt cold once the door closed. I was the first in my family to graduate college. No legacy admissions, no safety net. Just long nights, spreadsheets, coffee, and the quiet belief that if I worked hard enough one day, they would see me. That belief brought me back to my parents' backyard on a warm Sunday afternoon. String lights hung between the trees. Neighbors laughed. The smell of grilled meat floated through the air. From a distance, it looked like the perfect celebration. From the inside, it already felt wrong. I stood near the table holding a paper plate while everyone gathered around my older sister Rachel. She looked effortless as always, glowing in a new dress, talking about her recent trip to Arizona. My mother hovered beside her, smiling proudly, filling in details no one asked for. My father sat off to the side, scrolling on his phone, nodding occasionally without looking up. No one asked me about school. No one asked about my degree. No one asked how I felt. The cake sat at the far end of the table, white frosting, blue letters spelling out, "Congrats, Emily." It was pushed beside soda cans and napkins like an afterthought. Every time someone brushed past the table, it shook slightly. I watched it the way you watch something fragile, knowing no one else is paying attention. I remember thinking, maybe they were saving the best moment for last. Maybe they would surprise me. That thought lasted exactly 3 seconds. My nephew Noah ran toward the table laughing. He was 10 years old, old enough to know better. He looked at me with a grin that felt rehearsed and said, "Mom says you only got your degree so you can show off." People laughed. My mother laughed the loudest. I felt something tighten in my chest, but I stayed still. I had spent my whole life learning how to stay still. Then, Noah shoved the cake. The plate slid off the table and shattered on the patio. Frosting splattered across the ground and onto my shoes. There was a sharp collective gasp followed by laughter. Real laughter, not nervous, not awkward. Enjoyed. Someone told me not to be so sensitive. My mother waved her hand and said it was just a joke. My sister turned away, hiding a smile behind her glass. My father did not look up. I stood there holding the knife I had been using to cut slices. For a moment everything slowed down. The lights swayed above us. Laughter echoed. And I realized this was not a mistake. This was a pattern. This was who they were. I set the knife down, untied the apron around my waist, and walked away without saying a word. No one stopped me. I drove home alone that night through quiet streets and empty intersections. I did not cry. I did not scream. I felt something far more dangerous than anger. Clarity. When I got to my apartment, my phone buzzed. It was my mother. The message was short and final. "We have decided to cut contact. Stay away." A moment later, my sister reacted to the message with a heart. That was the moment everything changed. Not because it hurt, but because it freed me. I opened my laptop instead of my heart. The screen lit up my small living room. My budget spreadsheet was already open from earlier that day. 2 lines stared back at me like a confession. Parents' mortgage payment $400 every month. Sister car loan $640 every month. Both co-signed by me. Both paid by me. For 3 years. I remembered my mother saying, "You are the responsible one. Just help the family for now." I remembered believing that love meant sacrifice. I remembered how every month next month never came. Sitting there in the quiet, I understood something that would shape the rest of my life. They did not lose me because I walked away. They lost me because they never protected me. I typed one sentence into a new message. "I am removing myself from all shared financial obligations, effective immediately." No anger, no explanation, no guilt. I hit send. If you think this story ends with shouting or revenge, you are wrong. It ends with silence. The kind of silence that scares people who only know how to take. And that silence had just begun. After that night, people assume the pain came from the cake hitting the ground. It did not. The cake was just noise. What hurt was realizing that nothing about that moment was new. It was familiar, too familiar. And once you see a pattern clearly, you can never unsee it again. I grew up learning my place without anyone ever explaining it to me. In our house, Love was not something you were given freely, it was something you earned by being useful. My sister Rachel learned early that being admired brought rewards. I learned that being dependable brought expectations. Rachel was the kind of child teachers remembered: loud laugh, big dreams, always center stage. My parents loved telling people about her plans, her ideas, her life. I was the child, mentioned later if at all, the one who filled in the gaps quietly. When I was 12, Rachel got a new laptop because she said she wanted to start a business. I got her old one because mine still worked fine. When I was 15, Rachel quit piano lessons because she was bored. I was told to keep going because we had already paid for mine. When I was 17 and got accepted into college with a partial scholarship, my mother said that was nice, and then reminded me to help Rachel pack for her weekend trip. At the time, I told myself this was normal. Every family has roles. Someone shines, someone supports. I chose to believe that being the strong one meant I mattered in a different way. That belief followed me into adulthood. In college, I worked 2 part-time jobs. I paid my own rent. I learned how to stretch groceries and time and sleep. Whenever my parents called, it was never to ask how I was doing. It was always about logistics. Could you help us cover this just for now? Could you talk to the bank? Could you sign something? You understand numbers better than we do. I did, and I helped, every time. Rachel moved faster through life than I did. New relationships, new plans, new expenses, each one framed as temporary. Each one somehow became my responsibility. When she needed a car to get to work, my mother called me late at night saying this would help everyone. When my parents refinanced their house, they said it was only safer if I was listed too. You are family, they said. Family helps. What they never said was, thank you. By the time I graduated college, I had learned how to swallow disappointment so smoothly, it barely registered anymore. When friends asked why my parents never came to visit, I said they were busy. When classmates celebrated with families at graduation dinners, I told myself I preferred quiet. But deep down, there was a small, stubborn part of me that still hoped that one day they would look at me and see more than convenience, that they would notice how much I carried, that maybe graduation would be the moment everything shifted. That hope was the most dangerous thing I had, because standing in that backyard watching everyone laugh, while my cake lay broken on the ground, I understood something with painful clarity. I was not invisible by accident. I was overlooked by design. They had trained me to be the one who absorbed discomfort so others did not have to, the one who did not make scenes, the one who forgave quickly, the one who stayed. And the truth is this: people only laugh at you like that when they are certain you will not leave. Driving home that night, every memory lined up like evidence. The missed calls returned only when money was involved. The praise given to Rachel for effort, I quietly put in every day. The way my mother called me dramatic whenever I expressed hurt. The way silence was used to correct me. By the time I reached my apartment, I was not sad. I was awake. I replayed the moment Noah shoved the cake. He was just a child, but children repeat what they are taught. He had learned that my feelings were optional, that I was safe to mock, that I would stay anyway. That realization landed harder than any insult. The message from my mother cutting contact should have broken me. It did not. It confirmed what I already knew. My place in that family had always been conditional. Useful or gone. I sat on my couch, staring at the dark window, reflecting my own face. I looked tired, older than 26, but I also looked steady. For the first time, I allowed myself to ask a question I had avoided my whole life. What would happen if I stopped being the strong one? That question scared me more than losing them. Because if I stopped holding everything together, someone else would finally feel the weight. And deep down, I knew they would not handle it with grace. Here is the hook no one talks about in family stories. The moment you stop accepting your assigned role, people do not ask what they did wrong. They ask why you changed. And the moment I decided to change, the story was no longer about graduation. It was about power, control, and what happens when the quiet one finally lets go. That was when I knew the real fallout had not even started yet. People think walking away is the hardest part. It is not. The hardest part is what comes after. The silence that tests whether you will run back and apologize for a pain you did not cause. The morning after the party, I woke up expecting regret. I expected guilt to hit me the way it always did. Instead, there was a strange calm, the kind that feels unnatural when you have spent your life managing other people's emotions. I went through my routine on autopilot: shower, coffee, laptop open on the kitchen table. Outside my window, Portland looked gray and ordinary. Cars passed, people walked their dogs. The world had not noticed that my family had quietly erased me. Around noon, my phone buzzed. It was my mother. For a brief second, a familiar hope surfaced. Maybe she had reflected. Maybe the night had softened her. Maybe she would ask if I was okay. The message was short and cold. "We have decided to cut contact. Stay away." That was it. No explanation, no discussion, no acknowledgement of what had happened the night before. Seconds later, another notification appeared. A heart reaction. My sister. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Not because I was shocked, but because something inside me finally settled. This was not impulsive, it was coordinated, decided, approved. They had chosen each other, and in doing so, they had chosen to lose me. I did not reply. I set the phone face down on the table and listened to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. My chest felt hollow but not broken, more like a door had closed that I had been holding open for years. I thought back to every time I had defended them to myself. Every excuse I had made. They are just stressed. They did not mean it like that. Family is complicated. What I saw now was not complexity. It was consistency. They did not cut contact because I disrespected them. They cut contact because I stopped absorbing disrespect quietly. That afternoon I went for a walk. I needed air. The neighborhood smelled like wet pavement and spring leaves. I passed families laughing on porches, parents pushing strollers, normal scenes that felt distant from me now. I realized something uncomfortable as I walked. My family had always used silence as a weapon. When I disappointed them, they withdrew. When I questioned them, they ignored me. When I needed reassurance, they became unavailable. This message was just the loudest version of that silence. By the time I returned home, the calm had shifted into clarity. And clarity has a way of leading you straight to truths you have been avoiding. I opened my laptop again. Not to distract myself. To confirm something. My budget spreadsheet loaded slowly. Rows of numbers filled the screen. I scrolled down and there it was. 2 payments leaving my account every month without fail. Parents' mortgage, $400. Sister vehicle loan, $640. 3 years, 36 months, tens of thousands of dollars. I remembered signing the papers, sitting at the kitchen table years ago, while my mother slid documents toward me. She had smiled then, said I was responsible, that banks trusted me, that this would help everyone. At the time I had felt proud, needed, useful. Now all I felt was used. What stunned me was not the money, it was the timing. They had no problem accepting my financial support, but the moment I stopped playing my role emotionally, they erased me. That is the hook people do not expect. They will keep everything you give them, even after they decide you no longer belong. My phone buzzed again. This time calls, missed calls piling up. My father, my sister, unknown numbers from home. I did not answer. For the first time, I asked myself a question I had never allowed before. If they have already cut me off emotionally, why am I still supporting them financially? The answer was uncomfortable. Because I had been trained to believe my worth was measured by how much I could endure. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair. My hands were steady, my breathing slow. This did not feel like rage, it felt like alignment. I typed a single message. I am removing myself from all shared financial obligations, effective immediately. I read it twice. No insults, no accusations, no emotional language, just a boundary. I pressed send. The phone went quiet for exactly 40 seconds. Then everything exploded. Calls, messages, voicemails stacking on top of each other. Anger first, then panic, then guilt wrapped in threats. How could you do this to us? You are destroying this family. You owe us. We raised you. Not one message said, I am sorry. I did not respond. I turned my phone off and placed it in a drawer. Here is the truth no one warns you about. The moment you stop being useful, people stop being kind. That night I slept better than I had in years. Because for the first time, the silence was not punishment, it was peace. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The night after I sent that message felt different from every other night before it. Not dramatic, not explosive, just quiet, in a way that made my thoughts louder than usual. I sat on the edge of my couch listening to the city outside my window, breathe, and for the first time, I was not waiting for my phone to light up with instructions or guilt. I already knew they would respond. People who benefit from your silence never accept boundaries quietly. By morning, my phone was vibrating nonstop. I turned it on and watched the missed calls stack up like proof. My mother, my father, Rachel, numbers I did not recognize but knew belonged to relatives back home. Voicemails filled my inbox faster than I could delete them. I did not listen to any of them. Instead, I made coffee. I stood by the sink and watched steam rise from the mug while the phone continued to buzz on the counter. Something inside me had shifted overnight. The fear was gone. In its place was a calm that felt earned. Around 9:30, a message finally came through that was not a call. It was from my mother. "Do you know what you are doing to this family?" No greeting, no question about how I was, just accusation. A second message followed almost immediately. "Your sister cannot afford her car payments without you. Your father and I are already behind on the mortgage. This is cruel, cruel." The word sat heavy on the screen. I thought back to the cake hitting the ground, the laughter, the way no one had stepped in, the way my feelings had been dismissed with a smile. That had not been cruel to them. I did not reply. An hour later, Rachel messaged me. "I hope you are happy. You are ruining everything. This is not what family does." I almost laughed at that. Almost. Because what family does is not erase one child while leaning on her financially. What family does is not punish boundaries while demanding support. By noon, the tone shifted. My father left a voicemail. His voice sounded tired and controlled. He said we could talk this through, that maybe there had been misunderstandings, that we should not make permanent decisions based on emotions. That part almost worked. Almost, because I had spent my entire life being told my emotions were the problem. I deleted the voicemail without finishing it. Here is the truth that became impossible to ignore. They were not upset because I hurt them. They were upset because I interrupted their access to me. I opened my laptop and reviewed the documents again. Payment confirmations, co-signed agreements, emails going back years. The evidence was quiet but overwhelming. I had not imagined any of it. I had not exaggerated my role. I had been the safety net and the scapegoat at the same time. Around 3 in the afternoon, a new message came in from my mother. "We need to meet. This is getting out of hand. Come home and we will discuss this like adults. Come home." The phrase carried weight, control, authority, the expectation that I would return to my place. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed a single response: "There is nothing to discuss." I sent it and turned my phone off again. That was when the panic started on their end. Emails followed, long paragraphs filled with blame and rewritten history. Claims that they had supported me, that I owed them, that this was selfish and embarrassing. One message stood out: "You are acting like a stranger." I realized then that I had always been treated like one. That evening I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, not to distract myself but to prepare. Because clarity brings responsibility, and boundaries require follow-through. I searched for my bank branch and scheduled an appointment for the next morning. As I closed the laptop, a thought settled in that felt like a warning and a promise at the same time. When people lose control over you, they will try to regain it through urgency, fear, or shame. I went to bed knowing they would not stop. And I also knew something else. I was done explaining myself. If you have ever been told you are selfish for protecting your peace, comment 1 below. Sometimes the quiet ones have the strongest breaking points. The story was no longer about money. It was about who I was willing to be from this point forward. And tomorrow I would make it official. The next morning did not feel like revenge. It felt like exposure, like pulling a curtain back and finally seeing the shape of something that had been hiding in plain sight for years. I woke up before my alarm, heart steady, mind clear, already knowing this day would matter. I showered slowly and dressed with intention. Not because I wanted to look impressive, but because I wanted to feel grounded. Outside, the city was quiet, washed clean by an early drizzle. As I walked to my car, I realized something unexpected. I was not nervous. I was ready. The bank lobby smelled faintly of paper and coffee. Soft instrumental music played overhead. It was the kind of place designed to make people feel safe, while difficult truths were handled behind closed doors. A man in his 50s, with kind eyes and wire-rimmed glasses, introduced himself as Mr. Reynolds, and led me to a small office. He did not rush me. He did not interrupt. He listened. I explained everything calmly: the co-signed mortgage, the vehicle loan, the years of automatic payments, the recent demand that I continue paying even after being cut off as family. I slid the folder across the desk. Emails, screenshots, bank statements, every quiet receipt of sacrifice. Mr. Reynolds flipped through the pages slowly. His expression did not change much, but his nods told me everything. When he finally looked up, his voice was gentle. "You are not the first person this has happened to." That sentence landed harder than any accusation my family had thrown at me, because it meant I was not dramatic. I was not cold. I was not imagining things. He explained the process clearly: because I had no ownership in the house or vehicle, and because there was documented proof that I had been financially supporting others without benefit, I could be released as a co-borrower. The process would not be instant, but it would be effective. As he spoke, something inside my chest loosened. I had been carrying fear for so long I forgot what relief felt like. I signed the first document, then the second, then the third. Each signature felt like cutting a thread, not violently, cleanly, one by one. Mr. Reynolds made a call to the legal department while I sat there with my hands folded. I listened to his side of the conversation. Co-borrower removal, immediate freeze of joint credit access, notification to primary account holders. When he hung up, he looked at me and said quietly, "You did the right thing." I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Walking out of the bank, the air felt sharper, colder, but my lungs felt full. I stopped at a cafe on the corner and ordered a coffee. The barista smiled and asked how my day was going. "Good," I said. And for the first time, I meant it. By the time I got home, my phone had turned itself back on. Notifications flooded the screen. Missed calls, dozens of them, messages stacking so fast they blurred together. My mother, my father, Rachel. The tone had changed again. This time, there was no anger, only panic. "What did you do at the bank?" "They froze the account. My car payment was declined." "How could you do this without telling us?" I read them all without responding. Because here is the hook no one expects. The moment you stop rescuing people, they reveal how dependent they really are. Rachel sent another message, minutes later. "My car is about to be repossessed. My fiancé is furious. You are destroying my life." I thought about the years I paid quietly, the weekends I skipped, the stress I absorbed without complaint. And I realized something that surprised me. I did not feel guilty. I typed one sentence: "I just stopped paying for people who laughed when my cake hit the ground." Then I set the phone face down on the table. The silence that followed was not empty. It was powerful. If this moment feels familiar, if you have ever been treated like the family safety net without being treated like family, tap like now. Because the next part of this story is where everything truly shifts. That day did not end with celebration. It ended with clarity. They had lost control, and I had finally taken mine back. The decision was already made the moment I left the bank. But the consequences did not wait. They arrived fast, loud, and unapologetic. What I did not expect was how quickly my family would stop pretending this was about love and start proving it was always about control. That evening my phone would not stop vibrating. Calls from numbers I recognized and numbers I did not. Voicemails stacking one after another. I did not listen to them. I did not need to. The messages told the story clearly enough. "You went too far. Do you understand what you have done? This is unforgivable." Each message carried the same message beneath the words: "How dare you stop?" I sat at my kitchen table with the lights low, watching the screen glow and fade again. A strange thought crossed my mind. If I had truly destroyed something precious, they would be asking how to fix it. Instead, they were demanding that I undo it. That is when it became clear. They were not afraid of losing me. They were afraid of losing access. My mother sent a long message just after dinner. Paragraphs of guilt dressed up as concern. She wrote about sacrifice, about all they had done for me, about how families make compromises. She ended it with a sentence that stopped me cold. "You owe us this." Oh. That word finally cracked the last illusion I had been holding on to. Love does not keep score. Care does not come with invoices. And family does not punish you for choosing yourself. I typed a response slowly. "I do not owe anyone my silence." I sent it, and turned my phone off. Within minutes my building intercom buzzed. I froze where I stood. No one ever came unannounced. My chest tightened as I walked toward the screen mounted by the door. When the camera feed came into focus, my stomach dropped. My mother and Rachel stood in the hallway. My mother had her arms crossed. Rachel looked frantic. Her eyes were red. Her hair pulled back carelessly like she had rushed out the door. They were talking over each other, pressing the button again and again. "Open the door. We need to talk." "This is insane." I did not move. The knocking started next. Sharp, loud, relentless. I stood there, listening to the sound echo through my apartment. My heart was racing, but my feet stayed planted. This was the moment I had been avoiding my entire life. The moment where I had to choose whether blood automatically meant access. My mother raised her voice. I could hear her clearly through the door. "You cannot do this to us. We are your family." That sentence had always worked before. This time it did not. I took a breath and spoke through the door. Calm, steady, clear. "You need to leave." Rachel started crying. She said her car payment had failed, that her fiancé was threatening to leave, that I was ruining her future. My mother added that the neighbors were watching, that this was embarrassing, that I was making them look bad. I almost laughed at that. Almost. Because even now their concern was not about me. It was about appearances. I told them again to leave. They did not. That is when I realized something important. Boundaries without enforcement are just requests, and requests can be ignored. I called the non-emergency police line. My voice did not shake. I explained that 2 individuals were refusing to leave my residence, that I felt unsafe, that I needed assistance. While I waited, I sat on the edge of my couch, listening to their muffled voices outside. Anger, fear, disbelief. They had never imagined this version of me. When the officers arrived, the hallway filled with calm, professional authority. I watched through the camera as my mother gestured wildly, pointing at my door. Rachel cried louder, telling her version of the story. I did not open the door. I listened as the officer explained boundaries. Private property, adult autonomy, trespassing. My mother said she had rights. The officer said, "Not here." That was the moment power shifted fully. They left under instruction, not choice. Their footsteps faded down the hallway, heavy and defeated. I slid down against the wall once the silence returned. My hands were shaking now, but not from fear, from release. Here is the hook that makes people uncomfortable. The moment you enforce a boundary, people will accuse you of being cruel, even if they were never kind. I did not feel proud. I felt free. If you were watching this unfold, what would you have done differently, if anything? Comment below. Do you believe family should always come first, or do boundaries matter more? Share your thoughts, because this is where the real debate begins. That night I understood something that would stay with me forever. I did not lose my family that day. I lost my role, and that made all the difference. After they left, I thought the worst part was over. I was wrong. What followed was not loud. It was relentless, and it revealed something far more unsettling than anger. It revealed who they truly believed was responsible for their lives. The next morning, my phone turned itself back on, and immediately began to buzz like it had been waiting all night. Messages flooded in before I could even sit up in bed. My mother, my father, Rachel, distant relatives I had not spoken to in years. People who suddenly remembered my existence now, that something they depended on was gone. The tone was no longer explosive. It was strategic. "Your mother is not sleeping. Your father is under so much stress. Rachel is having panic attacks. How could you do this to your own family?" Every message carried the same implication. Their suffering was my fault. Their consequences were my responsibility. I read them slowly, one by one, and with each message something inside me hardened, not into bitterness, into understanding. Not one message asked why I had done what I did. Not one message acknowledged the cake, the laughter, the silence, the years of quiet payment. Not one message said, "I am sorry for what we put you through." Instead, they spoke as if the story had begun the moment I stopped helping. That was the hook I could not ignore. In their version of events, my pain had no timestamp, only their inconvenience did. Rachel sent a long message late that morning, paragraphs this time. She wrote about how embarrassed she was, how her fiancé was questioning their future, how her friends were asking uncomfortable questions. She wrote that I had always been jealous, that I had finally snapped, that I was punishing her for being loved more. I stared at that line for a long time. Punishing her for being loved more. It would have been easier if she had yelled, Easier if she had insulted me outright, but this was worse. This was revision. This was turning my silence into aggression, and my boundaries into cruelty. My father called next. I answered that one. I do not know why. Maybe a part of me still hoped he would surprise me. His voice was calm, measured, almost rehearsed. He said families fight, that this had gone too far, that I needed to be the bigger person, that I always had been. There it was. Be the bigger person. The phrase landed like a trap snapping shut. I realized then how often that phrase had been used to excuse the same imbalance. I was expected to bend because I always had. I was expected to fix things because I always did. I told him quietly that I was done carrying what was not mine. He sighed and said, "You are really going to let money destroy this family? Money. Not disrespect, not humiliation, not years of being overlooked. Money." I hung up without saying goodbye. By afternoon the messages grew sharper. Threats slipped in between guilt, accusations dressed as concern. My mother sent a message saying she had sacrificed everything for me, that without her I would be nothing, that cutting me off emotionally had been a mistake, but this financial chaos was unforgivable. I read that sentence twice. Cutting me off emotionally had been a mistake. Not cruel, not wrong, a mistake. Something temporary, something I should have waited out quietly. I did not respond. Then came the last message of the day. It was short, from Rachel. "You always ruin everything when things are going well." That one hit differently, because it told the truth without meaning to. Their lives had been going well because I had been underneath holding them up, quiet, invisible, replaceable. When I stopped, they did not ask how I was standing. They complained about the fall. That night I sat alone on my couch with the lights off, listening to the city outside my window. Cars passed, someone laughed somewhere down the street. Life continued without consulting my family drama. I thought about how quickly people show their priorities when they are scared. How blame is easier than accountability. How silence feels like betrayal to those who benefit from your voice staying quiet. Here is the hook no one prepares you for. When you stop enabling people, they do not see it as growth. They see it as abandonment. I did not feel angry anymore. I felt detached, as if I had stepped outside of a story I had been trapped in my whole life and was finally watching it clearly. They were panicking because they had built their stability on my compliance. And compliance had an expiration date. I placed my phone face down on the table and did not pick it up again that night, because I knew something important had happened. They had shown me exactly who they were when I stopped being useful, and that knowledge changed everything. Thank you for staying with us this far. If you're busy or need to step away right now, hit subscribe or hit like so you can easily find this video again later. Now, let's get back to the story. By the time the messages slowed, I understood something with painful clarity. This was no longer about emotions, it was about protection, because once people realize guilt no longer works, they look for other ways in. And I knew the next move would not be gentle. That was the hook I could not ignore. When boundaries start costing people money, they stop arguing and start acting. The following morning I did not check my phone. I showered, I dressed. I packed the same folder I had brought to the bank days earlier, and added more to it. Printed emails, screenshots, payment histories, copies of signed documents. Every quiet proof I had ignored for years because acknowledging it would have meant admitting the truth. I drove to the downtown branch just after opening. The lobby was calm. Too calm. I realized then how much chaos I had been living with that I mistook for normal. Here, no one raised their voice. No one demanded anything. People waited their turn. Mr. Reynolds recognized me immediately. He nodded once and led me back to the small office with pale walls and a single plant in the corner. I sat down and placed the folder on the desk between us. "I think they are going to escalate," I said. He did not look surprised. He asked me to explain everything again from the beginning, not because he doubted me, because the system requires clarity, dates, actions, evidence. So I told the story, the co-signing, the payments, the graduation, the message-cutting contact, the panic that followed when I stopped paying, the unannounced visit to my apartment, the police. As I spoke, my voice stayed steady. That surprised me. The words no longer shook. They landed. Mr. Reynolds listened without interrupting. When I finished, he folded his hands and said something I will never forget. "Family pressure is one of the most common reasons people stay financially trapped longer than they should. That sentence lifted a weight I did not know I was still carrying. Because it meant I was not uniquely weak. I was conditioned. He explained the next steps carefully. Because of the documentation, and because I held no ownership stake, I could complete a full liability release. It would formally remove my name from all existing obligations. It would also block any future attempts to attach my credit without my consent. This was not revenge. This was prevention. He asked me if I was sure. I did not hesitate. Yes, the paperwork took longer this time. Forms with language designed to protect institutions, not emotions. I read every line. I asked questions. I initialed carefully. Each page felt heavier than the last, not because of fear but because of finality. When I signed the last document, Mr. Reynolds stamped it and slid a copy toward me. Effective immediately, he said, you are no longer financially responsible for any of these accounts. I stared at the paper for a long moment. The date, my name, the official seal. I had spent years proving my value quietly, and in 10 minutes, I had undone the damage. Outside the bank, the air felt different, crisper. As if the city itself had shifted a few inches to make room for me, I walked without rushing. I noticed details I usually missed. A woman laughing into her phone, a couple arguing softly on the corner, ordinary moments that felt grounding. I stopped at a small cafe and ordered a drink I did not need. I sat by the window and watched people pass. My phone stayed silent in my bag. When I finally checked it, the messages were back. They froze the accounts. The bank says you removed yourself. This can't be legal. You blindsided us. I did not respond. Because here is the hook people struggle with. Legal boundaries feel cruel to those who relied on emotional manipulation. My mother sent a message that evening. Shorter now, tighter. You are really doing this. I read it once and put the phone down. That night I slept deeply. Not because the situation was resolved, but because my body finally felt safe. In the days that followed, the tone shifted again. Anger faded into bargaining. Bargaining into threats. Threats into silence. I kept records of everything. Dates, times, messages. I backed them up. I labeled a folder on my computer simply, boundaries. I realized then that choosing legal protection was not cold. It was compassionate, because it was the only language that could not be twisted. Here is the truth that makes people uncomfortable. Emotional guilt keeps you trapped. Legal clarity sets you free. I did not feel triumphant. I felt anchored. And deep down I knew this step would force a confrontation I could no longer avoid. Because once you remove the leverage people have over you, they reveal how they plan to survive without it. The next phase was coming, and it would not be quiet. I thought removing my name from the accounts would be the end of it. Clean, legal, final. I underestimated one thing. People who lose leverage rarely accept it quietly. They look for shortcuts, and sometimes those shortcuts lead straight to your front door. That is the hook no one warns you about. When money stops working, people start showing up in person. It happened 3 days later. I was cooking dinner, pasta boiling, music low. My apartment felt calm in a way I was still getting used to. Then, the knocking started. Not polite, not hesitant, sharp and relentless. The kind of knocking that assumes the door will open because it always has before. I froze mid-step. My stomach dropped with a familiar instinct I hated. The urge to fix it, to smooth things over, to make it stop. Instead, I walked to the video intercom and looked at the screen. My mother stood there with her arms crossed. Rachel paced beside her phone, pressed to her ear. Both of them looked angry and desperate in a way that made my chest tighten. "Open the door," my mother said loud enough for the hallway to hear. "We need to talk now." I did not move. Rachel stepped closer to the camera. Her eyes were red. Her voice shook. "Do you know what you have done? The bank froze everything. My car is about to be taken. My fiancé is furious. This is insane. Insane." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was familiar. Everything was always insane the moment I stopped helping. I took a breath and spoke through the intercom. Calm. Clear. "You need to leave." My mother scoffed. "Do not do this. We are your family. You do not call the shots here." That sentence told me everything. They still believed they had authority. They still believed I would cave if they applied enough pressure. Rachel knocked harder. "You are ruining my life," she yelled. "All of this over a stupid cake. Are you serious right now?" There it was. The minimization. The rewrite. I thought about the cake hitting the ground. The laughter. The years of payments, the messages cutting contact, the panic when the money stopped. This was not about cake. I repeated myself. You need to leave. They did not. That is when the moment shifted from emotional to practical, from family drama to safety. I opened my phone and called the non-emergency police line. My voice did not shake. I explained that 2 people were outside my apartment, refusing to leave, and that I felt unsafe. Through the door I could hear them arguing with each other now. My mother saying I was embarrassing her. Rachel saying this would ruin everything. Neither of them asking how I was. Neither of them stopping. When the officers arrived, the hallway filled with calm authority. 2 figures in uniform, measured, unmoved by emotion. I watched through the camera as my mother launched into her explanation. She pointed at my door. She said I was ungrateful. She said I had destroyed their finances. She said she was my mother and had rights. One of the officers raised a hand gently and said something that felt like a verdict. Mom, this is a private residence. If the occupant has asked you to leave, you must leave. My mother protested. Rachel cried louder. The officer did not change his tone. Family does not override trespassing. That sentence landed like a brick in the middle of the story they had been telling themselves. Rachel backed away first. Her face collapsed into frustration and disbelief. My mother looked at the door one last time, her eyes sharp and wounded. You will regret this, she said. I did not respond. They left under instruction, not choice. Their footsteps faded down the stairwell. The hallway returned to silence. I slid down against the wall and sat there for a long time. My hands were shaking now, not from fear, from release. Here is the hook that makes people uncomfortable. The moment you treat boundaries like rules instead of requests, people accuse you of cruelty. I stood up eventually and turned off the stove. Dinner forgotten. I poured a glass of water and drank it slowly. My phone buzzed with messages I did not read. Because the truth was simple. If someone has to yell to stay in your life, they were never respecting your place in it. Now here is where I want to hear from you. Lighthearted but real. If your family showed up uninvited like that, what would you do? Open the door, call the police, pretend you are not home. Drop your answer in the comments because I know people will disagree, and that is half the fun. That night I slept with the quiet confidence of someone who had finally enforced a line. I did not lose my family at my door that day. I lost the illusion that they ever saw me as separate from what I provided. And once that illusion was gone, there was no going back. People expect the ending to be loud, a confrontation, a victory speech, an apology that arrives just in time. Mine did not end that way. It ended quietly, and that is exactly why it changed everything. Here is the hook I did not see coming. The moment the noise stops, you finally hear who you are without it. After the night they were escorted out of my building, the messages slowed. Not immediately, but gradually, like a storm running out of energy once it realizes there is nothing left to break. My phone still buzzed from time to time, but the tone had shifted again. No more shouting, no more threats, just absence. And absence used to terrify me. Now it felt like space. Weeks passed, then months. I settled into a routine that did not revolve around anticipating someone else's needs. Mornings became quiet. Coffee tasted better when it was not rushed. I focused on my work in a way I never had before, because my mind was not split between deadlines and damage control. One afternoon, my manager asked me to stay after a meeting. I braced myself out of habit. Instead, she smiled and said something that stopped me cold. You lead with steadiness. People trust that. No one had ever described me that way before. Not strong, not reliable, steady. That word stayed with me. At home, my life grew smaller in the best way. Dinners, for one that felt intentional, not lonely. Weekends spent reading, walking, breathing. Friends who did not ask me to explain myself. People who liked me for who I was, not what I could provide. The silence that once felt like punishment, now felt like peace. 3 months later, an envelope arrived at my office. The return address was the bank. Inside was a formal letter confirming my complete release from all financial liabilities related to my parents and my sister. Official. Final. Undeniable. I held the paper in my hands longer than necessary. It was not revenge, it was closure. Around that same time, the online noise started to fade. The vague posts, the indirect accusations, they disappeared one by one. I did not celebrate. I did not check. I simply stopped caring. Then, almost a year after the graduation party, My phone lit up with a name I had not seen in months, Rachel. The message was short. No explanation, no excuses. I am sorry for everything. 6 words. I stared at the screen for a long time. The old version of me would have replied immediately, would have reassured her, would have softened the moment so she did not have to sit with discomfort. I did not. Forgiveness does not always mean reopening the door. Sometimes it means letting the silence remain intact. I placed the phone face down and went back to my life. Standing by my window that evening watching the city glow, I realized something simple and powerful. I did not win because they lost. I won because I stopped playing a game designed to drain me. Freedom did not arrive with applause. It arrived with calm. If you are still listening to this story, I want you to hear this part clearly. Setting boundaries will not make everyone understand you. It will reveal who never intended to. And that is not a failure. That is information. If you have ever been the quiet one, the fixer, the reliable one, who finally stopped carrying what was not yours, then this story is for you. And there are many more like it. Subscribe to the channel for more family revenge stories. Real, quiet, powerful endings that prove sometimes walking away is the strongest move you can make. And if this story made you feel seen even for a moment, you are not alone. Sometimes, silence is not the end. It is the beginning of finally belonging to yourself.